Greetings! This is I, Changeling Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome! We're diving back into the world of darkness once more, and I hope you're ready for it. Today, we're going to be going over some more information from Changeling The Dreaming. So if you're looking for some more Changeling adventures, well, today is your day. We're learning about one of the many Kithain, Boggans. And this will be a little bit of a long video, not necessarily the most difficult video, but organizing all the information that there is was a little bit of an effort, and I hope I've done it in a more concise way. But regardless, of course, if you're joining me, whether on, of course, Twitch over here, or later on YouTube, hey everybody, remember for you guys on the YouTube side, you have to do all the support things to make sure these videos keep coming, liking, subscribing, ringing the bell, all that kind of stuff, and leaving a comment. Let's talk Boggans. And we really should talk about the sources for Boggans, because that's a really good place to start. And I'm using a combination of the Wikipedia page and the C20 book here. But if you're looking for deeper information, you can start, of course, with the 2nd edition Changeling book, the Boggans Kith book, the Changeling Player's Guide for Changeling the Dreamer, and of course then the book I mentioned, which I'm using to a good degree, the 20th anniversary. I'm going to be combining that with some information from the Wikipedia site, a little bit of extras and stuff like their history. We should talk about that in a minute there. Where do we start when we talk about Boggans? Well, to talk about Boggans, we have to know that they are creatures of hard work and hospitality. Things born of hearth and home. As the road goes on, the goal is always to return. It's home. And it's your pleasures, a job well done, honest work, good company, regular routines. These Kithain are known for their honesty and integrity, dirt under the fingernails, that kind of thing. Simple pleasures, good food, good drink, warm fire, a comfortable chair. These are the things that are important to a Boggan. It represents them to a goose. And that, those calluses, that dirt under your fingernails represents you so much. If you need to know what's going on in the court, you ask a Boggan. They'll always know what's up to date in the current gossip and intrigue, which is also another important part, though. So they're born of charity, dreams of charity, service, vengeance. Yeah, vengeance is in there, too. They embody all those things. So darker stories, of course, go to the, vengeance part about it. There's stories of small house fairies that help families with chores or tend to farm animals. So there are two camps of Boggans, if you're looking at them on a general scale. One that prefers comfort and security of their homes, and those that humbly integrate themselves into other households. We'll kind of dive into the differences when it comes to modern stuff, but yes. Those who prefer their own house are rarely without guests, have full larder, drinking cabinets to stock, guest bedrooms fresh and clean, and they won't be picky about what guests they get. Those Boggans that find themselves consummate house guests and boarders, will oftentimes deal with a lot of other Kithain and be very welcoming, wise, helping things with cleaning, repairing, doing things that make them good guests beyond that, Even unseelie Boggans make welcome guests in this regard. Their presence can come with a price, but there are unseelie and seelie who welcome them. And gossip is an important art form for it. So yeah, that's some basics when you kind of think about Boggans. Gossip, friendliness, coziness, and this works for both seelie and unseelie. Helping out with a craftsman, finishing some chores, these kind of things. They're not necessarily shy, but you aren't really those that try to hit the spotlight either. They kind of just put their heads down, do their thing outside of it. They're not going for the spotlight. They know they're there. And when we talk about Boggans, they are the, standard lowest totem pole, but also the most important totem pole of the Kithain society. Yeah. Now it's time for my 5-part series on the history of Boggans. What I mean by this is the Boggan history is Fey history. We're going to be talking about a chunk of the history of changelings here, as they are in the world of darkness. It's going to be a matter of breaking this down the best I can without doing too many details. So this will be a little bit of a long. Let's start with the early history. We have to start with the mythic age, because Boggans were among the first, the Fae who regularly interacted with mortals, who dreamed them into being. So basically, in the early days, Fae are given shape by the dreams of mortals, and the powers of magic and the dreaming and all that kind of stuff. And these Fae, the earliest ones to interact with these mortals, are again the Boggans. Of course, humans shifted away to the Formians, and Boggans served to offer a new way of life. One through service and hard work rather than claiming tribute, subjugating the boss and culture. Boggans embodied the hope for a better life forged by the labor of one's own hands. Not a glamorous life, but one free of burden, beholden to none. So moving humans away from Formians, who were under their influence, we're not talking about Formians today, and this kind of created the basics of the Boggans-mortals relationships. And, they're against Formians, Boggans are one of the ones that are most directly opposed to them. Because Formians are more creatures of, nightmares. They're more constructed from the primal fears of man. And so they see that as a kind of threat to dreams, safety and stability, warmth and security, which they are a, champion of. Now, we do have to talk about a little bit of history here. And basically, we will just kind of go over this. Magic's hold in the world famed during the Sundering, where the children of dreaming took stock, consolidated their numbers, retreated in well-populated areas, that kind of thing. The structure of dreams in the world changed. Religion kind of spurred on. We get into the Middle Ages, where, we're still not in the Renaissance, there's still ignorance, and the world is changing. We have the shattering, banality marches forwards. Freeholds become scarce. The disconnection to the dreaming, that kind of stuff. The autumn world becomes its own kind of things. The Sahide retreat to Arcadia, basically leaving the commoners behind. The courts kind of break apart. We got the Black Death. So a lot of stuff is happening, basically, to the world. I'm not getting into the details of it because it's definitely involves Boggans, but this is a lot of more general history. Now we have to talk about the Changeling Way, because now we have the birth of the Changelings, and it is the Boggans that are at the heart of this to a degree. So, it is basically the Boggans discovered the solution to the onslaught of banality, as legends tell of it. So mortals were unaffected by that. They decided the best process to stay alive in this situation was to cloak themselves in mortal flesh. And it's not something they made light of. A lot of less invasive ideas had failed to this point in time. And finding a method for tying a Fae soul to a human body required a lot of trial and error. And a lot of magic. And it lost ancient forgotten art of the Changeling Way was used, and it required a massive amount of magic. But it was Boggans that cracked this code and allowed for this to be happen. And yes, the magic of the ritual of the Changeling Way has been lost, but, there's ideas of how it was implemented. So effectively, the shattering occurred, the retreat to Arcadia, the cutoff, the Changelings were facing doom, and what did the Boggans do? They're like, bam, man, we tried all these other shit, let's just become Changelings. Let's throw ourselves into mortal shells. We'll find a way to survive. And they did. They did. Now, we move on past this time here where, you know, there's a lot of loss of glamour, and in Tergorum is some hope. Surges of glamour, stabilizing the encroaching banality. It is marked by the Renaissance. Because the Renaissance was a change for the mortal world. And of course, Boggans, during the Renaissance, basically shown behind labor and tasks, built some of the greatest architecture achievements. So if there was a big architecture, probably a Boggan somewhere was involved. They weren't really motivated by the religious fervor of the time, but they dedicated themselves to artistry, complex tasks, finding solutions, developing new techniques, to the various grand cathedrals. So it's like, yes, if there's some great artists, great people, great works being built, there's probably, in this time period, a Boggan involved with it. The indirect connection to religion, as well as down-to-earth methodical hands-on work of buildings, made it a hotbed for Boggans, and they basically completed so many projects very efficiently. The Changeling awakening through the Resurgence was especially precious to Kithain everywhere, bringing these surges of glamour, you know, that they left behind in their chrysalises. Boggans were quickly to take on apprentices to master crafters, themselves usually Boggans, keeping a careful eye out for new changelings, allowing them outlets for natural inclinations, and helping to avoid persecution for their fantastic ways. And of course, this did go towards things like science and fashion, too. Because, you know, Boggans gravitated towards many topics during the Renaissance. Science had new discoveries, new inspiration, small splurges of glamour that had Boggans working closely with many of their dreamers. Fashions was hands-on work that allowed the creativity of Boggans to flourish. So fashions changed. Wealthy adored themselves with ornate clothing, and Boggans shined. Basically, during this period, most noble houses probably had a Boggan on as a retainer, crafting a decent wardrobe for them. And they would share tips and tricks and teach each other new techniques. You know, so this blending of science and art during the Renaissance was an inspiration for many. And things like the Gutenberg press was important. Because the Gutenberg press was an interesting thing because Boggans were torn about it. It led to literacy, quality of life, education, being accessible, but it dropped production on some items like illustrated manuscripts, calligraphy, handwritten books, things that were like very artistic but also work heavy. And that's the thing, is the mixture of Boggans is things that require a lot of work but are also very artistic. So, you know, this is the Renaissance, this is the big birth. It's the time of Boggan, in a way, you know? It is the time of the Boggan. Now, so, trapped in mortal shells, Changeling had to adapt. Boggans were one of the first to discover that they could use the minds of mortals in order to view their fairy halves, which was an interesting idea. They engaged with mortals and gave them plenty of insight in the way and so they had insight in the way they worked, and the way the dreams of humanity had shaped their chimerical space around them. So in these mortal bodies, Boggans basically maintained themselves in a collective identity probably a lot better than a lot of it. And they drew together, invited their new changeling brethren to stay with them while the Kithain worked to find new places in the world. Boggans established them. The Kithain were basically a welcome stop, and they supported them with advice and what they needed to carry on. And, you know, with their lives, scraps of glamour and dross would gather this, like, you know, and Kithain's made connections with mortals. So Kithain found themselves in this Boggans found themselves in very important parts. Households were bustling inns, craftsmen would go there, you know, things like that, that they were connecting with both mortals and helping out the other Kithain that were out there, because, again, their connections with mortal, made it easier for them to live in a mortal shell. They're like, I understand what I need to do to survive in this mortal body. We know mortals. Now, there are some things that are bad during this time period. Imperialism spread, and that was very anathema to the way of Boggans, in a way. Because Boggans liked preserving cultures and having different cultures and understanding them, different customs. It was a respect for others that Boggans had. So the idea of imperialism, where one culture was kind of taking over other, was kind of not against themselves, but they did a lot of stuff to try to preserve cultures and keep adventurous spirits in mind. Then, of course, the Industrial Revolution occurs, mass-producing cold iron. It's a, factory world. And Boggans are nothing but persistent. They pushed ceaselessly both publicly and privately for reform during this time period. Organizations offering shelter and comfort to activists, against corrupt owners and authorities, keeping labor practices reasonable. They were kind of on the laborers' side, you have to kind of see it as. And during the Industrial Revolution, where things went bad for laborers, they kind of pushed for that. It's the tragedy of the Industrial Revolution that the Boggans felt. Factories made it production of necessary goods and prices going down very big and important, but it was it was ease and comfort, and no one was getting the same amount of hard work, and it's this juxtaposition between things. It's a battleground. We continue going on until now, and the Resurgence we have to talk about, because we're post the 2 World Wars, and Boggans made their mark. They, again, there are Kith scholars that have kind of gone against them for this, because they did this very strongly. They promoted the nuclear family. Mortal societies insist on saddling the arrangement with an increased outdated gender roles. The Boggans still wanted the emphasis on family and togetherness, and the pushback, the specter of annihilation that the 2 World Wars and the nuclear devastation in the Cold War was bringing onto the world. The recognition of family and community grounded people to remind them that they weren't facing the horrors of the world alone. And it was also a reminder to decision makers on both sides of the Cold War that were people that were often saw incapable inhuman monsters wasn't true. There were people on both sides. Then, of course, we have the return of the Today. The resurgence of, glamour, a change and stuff like that, which brought about the Accordance War. Where poor Boggans were in an interesting situation. If you talk about the Accordance War with Boggans, whether or not they were alive during that time, they will usually turn pale and just shake their heads. Warfare has never set well with them. And they have a lot of heart. It was a chaos. And the chaos of the shattering, they remember it. Where fate tore themselves apart. They were basically uncomfortable and in an untenable position during the Accordance War. Because they are the most quintessential commoner of the commoner kiths, so they're obligated to speak up for the communities they had built and cherished and shepherded during the absence of the nobility. At the same time, their principality of goodly service runs deep in them. And they have a natural tendency of them to have a nation. There's a place for everything, and everything has a place. As a community mantra. So, of course, the natural leadership of the Sahilde is a important part of their situation. So it's sort of like they're arguing against these two sides. It's like there is a natural place for them there, but we've built these communities. The Dreaming seem to back the Sahilde's claims, and they might dislike their arrogance of these new arrivals, but it can't be ignored that it's there. So it's just that the Boggans were just in this position of arguing for commoners' right and the cause of the commoner nobility to the returning Sahilde. And in case for recognizing the status of those same exalted Sahilde as skeptical and downright hostile to freeholds full of scared and angry commoners. It's this juxtaposition. And yes, Boggans get seen as kind of ground gnomers by other commoners due to their willingness to swear fealty and follow orders in the wake of the Accordance War. It's not a question of kissing up or lacking spine. It's a recognition that everything works best when the entire system is functioning at peak capacity and everywhere is a place they can do the most good. The Sildae are made to take charge. Anyone who's met one can see it, and why not acknowledge that and let them do what's doing best? Boggans are champions for changing the system from within, so bend the knee if it means you can get close enough to do the powers, to get close enough to those in power to produce real change. That's kind of the Boggans' entire thing. So we get to New Camelot, and the aftermath of Concordia and the War, and now we get to, of course, the modern age. And we have to talk about the event of the Resurgence, which was, of course, the turn of the century. The big things like 9/11, War on Terror, all these things caused basically nightmare glamour to be introduced. This is the Resurgence, which brings us into the, changing of basically it's the apocalyptic thing, or changelings kind of occurred in a way, just like it did for all the other supernatural creatures in the world of darkness. This was the Resurgence. And there was a lot of issues with that, but there were some things that were great, and something great for the Boggans, because the rise of the internet brought a worldwide broad brush of glamour, actually. The scientific and technological breakthrough on a scale that wasn't comparable to the moon landing that sparked the Resurgence, but it remained a strong influence over time. Because the applications for business, commerce, information spread, the social aspect is what's most important to the Boggans. Touching base with friends and families, acquaintances, finding communities, bringing people together from across the world, Boggans rejoiced and embraced the community that the internet can cause. So many Boggans became leaders of digital communities, hosting fan sites, moderating forum boards, nurturing their communities and friends they found online, making flat white glare of the computer screen just a little warmer. Even to this day, the friendliest of gaming guilds, the trendiest self-care blogs, and they generate all manner of tutorials and tips, sharing information and creativity online. The rarer unseelie Boggans basically found the anonymity of the internet something very big, and they could enact their brand of personal vigilante justice on those that prefer to turn down others and torment undeserving targets. They do, all of them, don't deny the existence of dark place in the web. Seelie Boggans do what they can to thwart or subvert aggressive or harmful actions of others in their own communities. They showed light on darkest regions, basically, kind of have the inhabitants of them scatter like cockroaches. So in a way, social media is a thing that Boggans have a love-hate relationship with. You know? Oh... yeah, the social dynamic of online communities interactions can be such a thing. Some of them are able to adapt to the new reality, some of them aren't. They feel like flying blind in online conversations sometimes, so yeah. So there's things like Honeycomber, a Boggan exclusive invite-only private messaging app visible only to enchanted eyes, are gossip. They're just scurrilous gossip. And if it did exist, you've definitely never been mentioned on it. Well, maybe once. And if it did exist, well, it certainly doesn't. That you know of. Anyway, you need an invite? I love that line there. I had to do it. Yes. They love change, but they love change to be ordered. Like, not necessarily ordered like, like it's order out of chaos. It's like they like chaos as a concept like the mathematical chaos. Because chaos isn't like total chaos. It's systems where it's intrinsically unable to measure it kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing when you talk about chaos. It's like, again, I saw someone talk about chaos a little recently, and it's, the drop in the back of the hand from that Jeff Goldblum's character talked about in Jurassic Park, and that is actually chaos, where if you put a drop, you don't know where it's going to go because there's so many systems in place that, change it at any point in time. It's that kind of system. They like that organized chaos, not full chaos kind of thing, So, and, Boggans are people that dive into online life, spend a great deal of it, get overwhelmed, swear they're going to delete social media accounts from their phones, do exactly that, and then hastily reinstall the app a few days later to find out the juicy stuff they missed. Because they also love gossip, too. So that's the other thing. They love gossip, so yeah! And they also, another big thing that they love is crowdsourcing. It gets a community together to give someone the right to basically, the ability to do something. To, put something together. So crowdsourcing, things they love things like old-timey crowdsourcing, like Amish barn raisings, That's something where a community gets together and does something as a group. So crowdsourcing is a big thing for them, too. It's so interesting to see the creative overtones that are there, and the Boggans that are just at the heart of a lot of this. So yes, the Essence was not everything everybody hoped to, but Boggans refused to give up. They see this as a good point in Kithain history, where they can kind of use what's going on here. There's creative endeavor, creativity going around that they can feel, and it's glamour that's related to it. And they know that work completed under crunch feels unhollow and melancholy, because there isn't the catharsis of having a finished project after the toil. So, they're very anti-crunch culture. Crafting under stress and strife doesn't do anything to help at all. And that just is a chunk of banality. So that's something they basically fight against, too. And while some Kithain are trying to find a way back to Arcadia, despite tales of its fall, we have then the Boggans, who have a much simpler plan. Believe in people again. DIY culture, handcraft sites, personal creative outlets, they're all things that they support and push forward. Some of them are doing it. Cottage industries, the digital fire, which has reforged a lot of stuff. There's these sparks of glamour, of hopeful energy that Boggans love to flame. Homemade goods, creation of video tutorials, all this stuff. And that's where modern Boggans kind of fall into the world. It's an interesting thing. So, let's talk a little bit about just the generals of Boggan society, because when we talk about the magical world, and of course, Boggans, they are the normal folk of it. Boggans are in a lot of ways your general background character. They're the townsfolk who cheer when the hero arrives, the shopkeepers at the store, who provide adventurers, questing provisions. They're everywhere, and you usually really don't see them, because they're just part of the synergy. And the background is, to them, where they exist. They are the most common of Kith, because their dream is universal. Every time a jet-weary setter stares blearily at airport departures and thinks of her family. Every time an introvert closes the door behind them and sighs with delight. Every time a homesick child cries, part of that dreaming fosters Boggans, that fosters Boggans grows stronger. So it's sort of it's one of those things is Boggans, they're the easiest to survive. That's why they're so common. And the thing is, they tend to be undervalued. What boring dreams. You could be dreaming of exploration, glory, mystery. Why dream of something as dull and normal as home, as hearth? But to travel, you must have a home to return to. To fight, you must have something worthy to protect to. The very existence of mystery is bound to the contrast of the familiar. They are the essence of common folk. When humanity shivered in the shadows cast by the dawn of civilization, their first dreams were very simple ones. Warmth, shelter, enough to eat, companions they could trust. Everything is built upon that, and that is Boggans. Boggans also support all of Changeling society. They do the basics but essential craft work that knockers disdain. They perform all the constant emotional labor of empathy. They feed everyone from the tiniest sparrow puka to the most massive troll. They make the beds that weary changelings return to after long days full of adventures. They make the homes. Every refugee knows you don't understand how important home is until you lose it. It's a sacred mission of every Boggan to make sure their family and friends never suffer that harsh realization. So they have a very homespun, basically, lifestyle. They are the administrators, the homemakers, the crafters, the servants, the hermits of, these places. They build communities. Like a knitting circle. A small group of Boggans can come together, very similar to a knitting circle, to accomplish a task. Because they're not against also going to each other for help. That's another thing about a Boggan. Getting the work done yourself feels great. But you also have to recognize when you need to work with other people. When you have to be the chef. A chef themselves isn't going to make a full meal. Isn't going to feed a restaurant. You're going to have sous chefs. You're going to have line cooks. And you're all going to work together. So it's this idea of communities and circles and squads that work together. As I mentioned, gossip is a big thing about it. They love to gossip. Any little juicy bit of anything is just a natural thing for them to share. Daily drama, what makes people tick, interesting little things, observations of people's lives. They take advantage of the I'm just scenery aspect of them to basically pick up on a lot of things. The tactic, of course, works better with mortals or prodigals, though, their reputation as gossip monger is widespread in the Kithain. So, yeah, if you're a gathering Kith and you're nearby to a Boggan, you should know it's going to be its spread. At very least, their reputation exceeds them in that case. That gossip can happen. But yeah. So Boggans also, you're seldom to see them chasing noble titles. Gratitude is all well and good, but beyond that, recognition is secondary in getting the job done well, and sometimes even to be avoided as a distraction. So that's a big thing there. Grand titles, not important. Getting the work done and having it done and being ready for the next job is what is very rewarding for a lot of them. A grateful smile can be all they need to keep their spirits up. It's why you do sometimes get Boggans that go for those noble titles, that go for respect and find themselves, there. And even unseelie Boggans honor the notion of nobility. That's another thing, is Boggans recognize the functioning of other Kithain organizations and how the society works. And again, the fact that unseelie of them recognize nobility, recognize knights, and bowing to ladies, again, whether they truly respect the individual, or just respect the title itself for the unseelie ones. But there's this respect, this formality to a lot of the things that Boggans do. Connected to this, an important part to talk about is, of course, love. Boggan love is born of a deep awareness. They're highly emotional, intelligent by nature, and bring that to romance. But with a quiet and immensely successful rate. They're diligent about communication, and they recognize that their relationships require real work, much like anything else. Unlike a lot of other Kiths, which can be a little bit more flighty or fanciful. They enjoy some of the most stable and long-lasting romantic relationships in history, sometimes spanning multiple lifetimes. lovers from past incarnations meet and discover that they somehow know all the movements of cooking and cleaning together. You know, that's kind of the thing, is sometimes they'll find themselves over multiple lifetimes and just remember it all. Just remember those little things about it. And again, it isn't to say that Boggan romance is all about work and long-term planning. They are discreet. They're not prudent, though. And usually they're more happy to accept gratitude as from a well-fed satyr in the form of physical favors. Their flings, though, are clearly delineated. They see them for what they are, and make sure all parties involved know what's going on, and that everyone is expecting from these dalliances. So, flings exist, but they are just that, flings. So a Boggan will make a diligent and thoughtful lover. They're attentive to the emotions, able to skillfully navigate from anything from a private rendezvous to full-on Kithain orgy, using their awareness of social dynamics. That's a really interesting statement. And when they have a job to do, they perform it skillfully and through, particularly when the job is pleasuring someone they adore. And thoroughly. Skillfully and thoroughly. I love this part. I'm sorry. It's just such an interesting take on the entire thing, you know? It is very Boggan. It is very Boggan. And then the last thing I want to mention in this part of their society is, of course, rest and relaxation, because what's the point of working hard if you're not working towards something? You know, you're acquiring laurels if you can't spend a lazy summer afternoon resting on them at one point in time. The reason that content as a Boggan at a hearth is an old phrase describing true happiness, because though Boggans enjoy working, they also enjoy the fruits of that labor. A good food, fruit, apple pie, berry tarts, glazed pears, generous bellies, they love to eat. Baked goods are very big on their things, trying new recipes, trying a little bit of everything. Good company, of course, along with them. Casual creations as part of recreations. Talking, watching movies with friends. Knitting, small projects, sketching, whittling, watercoloring. Many have a blush at the word. Many would blush at the word artistry, but they like little delightful objects, things for fun, putting things together. Yeah. If Kith have a vice in the if Boggans have a vice in this realm, it's of course smoking. Carving and smoking pipes is a traditional and popular pastime. Now, the practice has been identified as a health risk. There is a disagreement in the Kith community on what to do about this form of recreation. Do they just abandon generation-old smoke ring blowing contests and throw exclusively carved antique pipes? Some split the difference and find non-tobacco substitutes to smoke, while other more ambiguous gardeners in the Kith experiment with harmless but satisfying chimerical plants. It's not a perfect solution, but what do you do about this difficult tradition is an ongoing question. Many are avid readers. Yeah, I mean, like, that's basically... Boggans are very much so like, you know, if you look at, like, halflings and Lord of the Rings, too, a little bit of that kind of thing, too, you know? They're avid readers, and the most comfortable way to go on an adventure is to basically go to a library and enjoy a book there. And their deep capacity for empathy leads them to basically lose themselves in the perspective of protagonists. They can put themselves in someone's shoes because of this. Now, it is also important to know that a common mistake people make is underestimating Boggans. It's a chronic problem, because you don't have to be the biggest or baddest threat in the room. Leave that to the redcaps and the trolls. A super fast, super skilled craftsman, who are also born social manipulators, can be just as difficult. Because you're going to get sucker punched by an angry Kith. Why they are, from Marshall's standpoint, so very dangerous. I'm smoking weed too, yeah. is that how quickly they can go from normal to battle ready. Craftsworks allows them to forge weapons almost as fast as some people draw them. They can put in instant battlements, and homesteads can be made in forts just like that. And Boggans don't shift to war footing lightly. When they do, they don't hold back. Their trades can shift down a darker road. A tailor grabs her awl and some leathers and becomes an armorer. An herbalist a poisoner. A pharmacist a bomber. A creative mind can turn to almost any innocent-seeming possession into a crucible of violence. Now, in the midst of combat, Boggan is vulnerable. But there are groups, they can do that. They have craftworks. They can create a siege engine, But a force to be reckoned with. They're vulnerable. They aren't like the tough big ones. And they organize into crews. Orient around a head, basically a leader, and work together with terrifying rapidity and social awareness of the dynamic of the group expanding, with every member putting it together. So yeah. So, it's a thing to keep in mind. They can also have some dark tactics, using things like subtle ones, gossip, to their advantage. Bring down things. So, yeah. The organization, their ability to form groups, means that they can form up to these military squads so very quickly. So it's, if you piss off a Boggan, or a group of them, be ready. Yeah, they aren't the physical, big, mean folks. They can pick up a fight. Now let's talk about the individuals a little bit. And of course we can talk about how they look. Boggans are also short in stature, with thick, downy hair, and a tendency towards plumpness. They often have small, bright eyes, emphasizing their large noses. Their hands are large and callous, with agile fingers and gnarled knuckles. They often have exceptionally thick eyebrows and a frame their eyes to grow wildly. Their skin is tanned and darkened and wrinkled with age. Their attire is usually simple by Kithain standards. And with left and nothing in their hands, they would kind of visit a little bit, kind of seeking something they need fixed or something to do. So, they're very, wanting to work with their hands. Comfort will be the important part about them. Keep that in mind if you're ever going to find one. And, in modern times, graphic designers, landscapers, fashion designers, house cleaners, carpenters, jewelers, basically jobs that involve hands is where they kind of dive into most of the time. So childhood, we'll talk about lifetime. In the beginning of this life stage, they exhibit a powerful curiosity for everything in the world. They take delight in meeting new people, learning new things, exploring new places. They want to know everything about everyone and everything, everything about everything and everyone. They explore the world with wonder in their eyes, and will talk to anyone that will sit long enough to listen and put up with their questions. Most Boggans are notorious homebodies. Childlings are commonly found out and about in the world, often poking their nose in places they shouldn't. So then we get to Wilders. Again, these are the different seemings of them. It's basically their lifespan, in a way, if you can think of it that way. So, yes. So yeah. Wilders. So you're kind of like the, middle-aged. You're adult. You're a perfectionist. But a Wilder can take that to the extreme. Every task must be completed to perfection, and they must always do more than anyone. A goal that can be easier by their birthright. However, two Boggan Wilders get into competition. They may need someone to step in and tear them apart, because it could become basically fiercely competitive. Very easily. It's also kind of seeking out a little bit of adventure during this time period. they're still the most likely to worry about the wholesomeness of food they purchase, the quality of tobacco in their pipes, that kind of thing. And then they reach the age of grump, which you're kind of settled in. When you entered the grump stage of your life, you've seen it, you've heard it, you still maintain a desire to know more, but you've lost your competitive edge. You prefer to settle in one place, a freehold, or a place where they believe they can be more of service. Gathering and compiling information is of utmost importance to you at that point in time. You keep a good store of knowledge about the local Kithain. You have a vast library of stories, journals collected over your life. You're kind of settled into things. You can still putter about a little bit, but you've got your permanent home. You're ready to settle in. Yeah. So, charity is a cardinal virtue of Boggans. Not only do they work, they often work without asking for compensation. An unscrupulous individual might think this kith as easy to take advantage of, but that's nothing further from the truth. They value more the thing is, the one thing they value more highly than charity is freedom. They will not be forced to labor, nor will they force others. Things like slavery is anathema to them. They were one of the first communities to outlaw the practice among themselves and still fight it wherever they find it. They are vigilant on signs of exploitation, too. They have been instigated many union strikes throughout history, and they've been the backbone of them. Rumor has it that one of them suggested the concept of the weekend to Henry Ford in the early 1900s. They do enjoy work, though. It's a joyful and necessary job, and it doesn't seem much like you might not understand what they're doing, but, they're doing their vocation. Cooking, woodwork, milkshake making, fashion designing. They'll do it with what they need. But again, they choose what they do. Work is something you do, but you choose what you do. The freedom of choice is important. If you feel pressured to do the work, then even the greatest job in the world you will derive no joy from it. But if you choose the work, then the job automatically becomes the best job in the world. And that's the true meaning of work to Boggans. They like working, but they like choosing their work. Now, Boggans do hate something. Retail! Big box stores! It's not only corporate banality in faceless institutions. No changeling likes that. But they loathe these stores. Because these are little more than slavers. In their definition. It might be beneficial to community. They basically set themselves as the only option as small towns drive out other business. And they see that. So Kith feel similarly about corporate retailers in a lot of ways. So certainly, yeah. And also, if we go to the Unseelie Boggans, they've been known to brave the banality extremes and insinuate themselves into corporate structures in order to sabotage the business from inside, or at least keep the new chains far away from changeling communities. Of course, another thing is the banality of debt. It may be seen the idea of debt being important to a kith whose guiding principle is charity, but if you understand the definition of work, it makes perfect sense. Being in debt means you've lost the freedom of choice. You have to perform the labor. Maybe you can say how or when the debt is paid off, but you're bound to it. A Boggan engaged in debt is not engaged in true work. Boggans tend to be more aware of others than the danger of accepting favors and striking bargaining because of this. Basically, they understand what it means to get to debt. It won't stop them from doing something that might do that, but there has to be reason behind it. There must be a reason for you to occasionally need a wizard and a whole troop of dwarfs to pry Boggan out of their cozy home and go into adventure. Hobbits or Boggans. And basically, they just did a Lord of the Ring reference here. In information. I'm talking to you about it. I like it. I like the Lord of the Rings reference. So yeah, there has to be a reason behind it to go into that. Basically, there's a clear distinction between becoming indebted and accepting responsibility. You know, you have to make it a positive thing a little bit. Beneficial bargains that are mutually beneficial and oaths that better everybody's lives. And the honor of service in the entire thing, and gratitude. And understanding what your home is. But that's, some basics on Boggans. Now, we have one final thing to talk about before we're done today. One little bit of one. And that's, we do have to talk about the Escheat. Because Boggans are largely a Seelie. And this is fairy traditions, fairy law. And largely Seelie kith, Boggans are staunch proponents of this scheme, adhering strictly to the rites laid out. Unseelie Boggans prefer to see these laws as malleable, and often highly skilled in escaping consequences or justifying their actions as lawful. Of course, with talk fails, they can always resort to black mark, gossiping using the juiciest secrets that Boggans love to listen in conversations. So the most ardent Unseelie Boggans sees the basic sense in the rules of Escheat. But, they apply it, but they don't outright break it. They bend the rules. So in a way, both Seelie and Unseelie particularly abide by this cheat, which is the right to mace, basically the right to domain, the right to dream, protected care for dreamers, the right to ignorance. Seelie Boggans are most likely to, adhere to this most strictly. That's the right of humanity to be ignorant, the right of rescue, the right of safe haven, the right of life. These are all very important. These rights, and I'm not going to go necessarily deep into the history right now, because it is more of a general fairy tradition, but just know that these are very important to, especially Seelie kids, and even Seelie Boggans, but even Unseelie Boggans will, at very least, in a way, respect it, understand it, and know where to bend it. Just the right place. Anyway, I think that's a great place to leave it off. I could go into the Boggans' relationship with, honestly, various other kith, houses, other supernaturals, but I don't think it's really needed here. I think this hits up all of our major information on them. So yeah, that's the Boggans. And I think, I'm just going alphabetically on these, but interestingly enough, I feel like they're one of the more interesting kith to talk about, to start out with. They are basically a center point of a lot of society in the changeling world. They are the ones that started becoming changelings. They found the way to it. They led the way. They are this foundation of a society. They provide a lot of the basic needs of so many other kithkin. They basically are this low ground that are the stability of their entire way of existence in a way. And that's what makes them so interesting to start out with. And yeah, there are some interesting aspects to them that don't make them simple and boring. Yeah, they like to get a good job done. They like simple work. But it's work they choose, work they love. And then after they're done their work, they're ready to relax, maybe get a little partying in, but just enjoy the simple things which make life great. At home, with their family, knowing they've done a job well done. They've succeeded at it. Enjoying a pie, a baked good, a meal, a drink, whatever it is that makes them happy. Spending it with people they love, or maybe just taking a small adventure when they have some free time, a little trounce here and there, finding someone that they can have a little fling with, all that kind of stuff. But ready to head back home when it's needed. They are probably, of all the Kithain, the one the one most likely to survive much changes and problems that go on. It's the fact that that dream of hearth and home exists in so much of the mortal world. You know, we are all connected to that as mortals. Think about that. How much that is important to you, and that dream basically will keep them in existence. Much more than many of their other brethren, perhaps, if things go more extreme. Again, we've reached an area where glamour has kind of more come back to the world to a degree, but certainly speaking, it doesn't mean more issues could arrive. That's always a worry. But all this makes them, you know, so interesting and kind of neat. And some of their abilities just that they have. The fact that they're very good at reading social situations and their craft books are very big characteristics. You know, that they are very good at understanding the social situation, reading it, being prepared for it, and honestly speaking, staying as a background character as long as they need to. If they need to do something and step into the light, they will. But if the job doesn't need that, they're just going to sit down, put their head down, do what they need, and recognize what they need to do. I think that's why they're so interesting. But we'll leave it here. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Boggans. I try to keep calling them Boggans, but the Boggans. Bogtan. That's just a me because they're similar words. If you want to see more tabletop-related stuff, of course, you can always check things out on my YouTube channel and me live over on Twitch. The Twitch schedule for tabletop stuff, if you want to join mine, is Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays, early to mid-afternoon, and then that always goes up on YouTube. I usually talk about World of Darkness stuff on the Fridays. I have a live play of a role-playing game. It's Pathfinder 1st Edition on Wednesdays, 9 p.m. EST, Crimson Queen. Always check that out. And of course, Saturdays at 6 p.m., discussing tabletop. Talk about news of the week, dive into big tabletop-related topics. It's very fun. And remember, you can always just join us over on YouTube if you can't join us live. If you're here on YouTube, that's just fine. I do have social media, Discord, Twitter, link below, and I think that's all the shout-outs. Just, you know, this channel, the support, this place here, the support you give here is great for it, and I'm glad we get everybody that we do that sits around, watches the video, enjoys them, and I hope you always enjoy learning about what I say. But anyway, until the next time we talk about Changeling, World of Darkness, other tabletop-related stuff, I bid all of you out there a deep and wonderful farewell.